Daniel Cole stood at the window of the transport ship and watched the stars pass by. He was a long way from Earth. 3 weeks ago, he had been a simple Marine stationed at a base in Texas. Now he was traveling to an alien world to guard a princess he had never met. The Valorians had made contact with Earth 5 years ago. They were tall beings with blue skin and silver eyes. They lived for thousands of years and could read minds with their telepathic powers. When they first saw humans, they thought very little of them. Humans were young. Humans were weak. Humans could not touch minds or bend light with their thoughts. To the Valorians, humans were like children playing in the dirt. But humans were also strong. They could survive wounds that would kill other species. They could fight without rest for days. They could push through pain and fear in ways that confused the Valorians. And so, when Queen Seraphine needed a bodyguard for her daughter, she asked for a human. Daniel did not know why the Queen had made this choice. He did not ask questions. He was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. His commanders had told him this mission was important. If he did well, it would help all of humanity. It would show the galaxy that humans deserved respect. The transport ship landed on the Valorian homeworld just as the twin suns were setting. Daniel stepped off the ship and felt the warm air touch his face. The sky was purple and orange, and the city before him was made of white stone and crystal towers. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest feel tight. A group of Valorian guards met him at the landing platform. They wore silver armor and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Their leader was a tall male with pale blue skin and cold eyes. He looked at Daniel the way a person might look at an insect. "You are the human," the guard said. It was not a question. "Sergeant Daniel Cole," Daniel replied. "United Earth Coalition Marine Corps." The guard did not seem impressed. He turned and walked toward the palace without another word. Daniel followed. The palace was enormous. The halls were wide enough for 20 men to walk side by side. The walls were covered with paintings and carvings that told the history of the Valorian Empire. Daniel saw images of great battles, wise rulers, and strange creatures from distant worlds. He felt very small. They brought him to a large room filled with light. At the center of the room stood a young Valorian female. She had deep blue skin and violet eyes that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Her silver hair fell down her back like water. She was wearing a white dress that shimmered when she moved. This was Princess Valera. She looked at Daniel for a long moment. Her face showed no emotion. Then she turned to one of her attendants and spoke in her own language. Daniel did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. She was not happy to see him. The attendant translated. "The princess welcomes you to the palace. You will begin your duties tomorrow. A servant will show you to your quarters." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, Your Highness." The princess did not respond. She simply turned and walked away, her attendants following behind her like shadows. Daniel watched her go and felt a cold feeling settle in his stomach. This was going to be harder than he thought. His quarters were small but clean. There was a bed, a table, and a window that looked out over the city. Daniel sat on the bed and thought about his situation. He was alone on an alien world, surrounded by people who did not want him here. The princess saw him as nothing more than a primitive creature. The guards saw him as a joke, but Daniel had faced worse. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth. He had watched friends die in his arms. He had survived things that should have killed him. A cold princess and some arrogant guards were not going to break him. The next morning, Daniel reported for duty. The princess was preparing for a diplomatic tour of the Rim worlds. She would visit 4 planets over the course of 2 months, meeting with local leaders and negotiating trade agreements. Daniel would accompany her as part of her security detail. Commander Theron, the head of the Valorian Guards, gave Daniel his instructions. The commander was even taller than the other Valorians, with scars on his face that spoke of many battles. He looked at Daniel with something between curiosity and contempt. "You will stay close to the princess at all times," Theron said. "You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not touch anything unless told to do so. You will follow my orders without question. Is that clear?" "Yes, Commander," Daniel said. Theron studied him for a moment. "I do not know why the Queen chose a human for this task. Your kind cannot sense danger the way we can. You cannot read the intentions of those around you. You are blind and deaf compared to us." Daniel said nothing. There was no point in arguing. "But the Queen has given her orders," Theron continued. "So you will serve. Try not to embarrass yourself too badly." The diplomatic tour began 3 days later. The first world they visited was called Serenus, a planet of vast oceans and floating cities. The princes met with the planetary governor while Daniel stood in the corner of the room, watching everything. He noticed things. He noticed the way one of the governor's advisors kept glancing at the door. He noticed the nervous movements of a servant near the back of the room. He noticed the strange bulge under the coat of a guard standing by the window. He said nothing. He was only human. What did he know? But he remembered everything. He filed away every detail in his mind, building a picture of the world around him. The Valorians trusted their telepathy to warn them of danger. Daniel trusted his eyes and his instincts. The tour continued. They visited 3 more worlds over the next 6 weeks. On each world, Daniel watched and waited. He studied the faces of everyone who came near the princess. He memorized patrol routes and security schedules. He noted every entrance and exit in every building they visited. And he noticed something else. The princess's cousin, Lord Malachar, had joined them on the 3rd world. He was a handsome Valorian with a smile that never reached his eyes. He laughed with the princess and brought her gifts and spoke of family and loyalty. But Daniel saw the way Malachar looked at Valera when she was not watching. There was something dark in those silver eyes. Something hungry. Something dangerous. Daniel kept his thoughts to himself. He was just a human bodyguard. No one would believe him even if he spoke. But he stayed close to the princess, and he kept his weapon ready, and he waited for the storm he knew was coming. The ship traveled through space for 7 days on its way back to the Valorian homeworld. During those 7 days, everything changed. Princess Valera no longer treated Daniel like a servant. She no longer called him the human or looked through him as if he was not there. Instead, she sought him out. She asked him questions. She listened when he spoke. On the 3rd day of the journey, she came to his quarters in the evening. Daniel was sitting by the window, watching the stars slide past. His shoulder was healing well, but it still ached when he moved. "May I come in?" the princess asked. Daniel stood up quickly. "Of course, Your Highness." She entered the room and looked around. It was small and plain, nothing like the grand chambers she was used to, but she did not seem to mind. She sat down on the edge of his bed and folded her hands in her lap. "I have been thinking about what happened on Ashfall," she said. "About the attack, about you." Daniel remained standing. He was not sure if he should sit or remain at attention. "What about it, Your Highness?" Those assassins were not common criminals. Their weapons were too advanced. Their training was too good. And the psionic dampeners. She shook her head. Such devices are almost impossible to obtain. Someone with great power sent them. "I had the same thought," Daniel said carefully. The princess looked up at him. Her violet eyes were filled with worry. "I think I know who it was. I think it was my cousin, Lord Malachar." Daniel said nothing, but something in his face must have given away his thoughts. The princess nodded slowly. "You suspected him too," she said. "I could see it in your eyes whenever he was near. You watched him the way you watched the assassins." "I had no proof," Daniel said. I still have no proof, and I am just a human. No one would believe me. I believe you." The princess stood up and walked to the window. She stood beside him, close enough that he could smell the strange flowers she wore in her hair. Malakar has always wanted the throne. He believes he would be a better ruler than my mother. He believes our family has grown weak. "And you stand in his way," Daniel said. "I am the youngest, but I am also my mother's favorite. If something happened to me, it would break her heart. It might even break her mind. And then Malaya could take control." The princess turned to look at Daniel. "He will try again." "I am certain of it," Daniel nodded. "Then we need to be ready." From that night forward, Daniel and the princess spent hours together every day. At first, they talked about security. They discussed possible threats, escape routes, and emergency plans. Daniel taught her basic self-defense moves that could help her if she was ever alone and in danger. But soon their conversations moved beyond matters of safety. The princess asked Daniel about Earth. She wanted to know about his home, his family, his life before he became a soldier. Daniel told her about growing up in a small town in the mountains. He told her about his mother, who had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. He told her about his father, who had died in a factory accident when Daniel was 12 years old. He told her about joining the Marines because he wanted to make a difference, wanted to protect people who could not protect themselves. The princess listened to every word. She did not interrupt or judge. She simply listened. In return, she told him about her own life. She told him about growing up in the palace, surrounded by servants and guards, but always feeling alone. She told him about her mother, the queen, who loved her fiercely, but was always busy with matters of state. She told him about her father, who had died in a war before she was born. She told him about the burden of being a princess. Everyone wanted something from her. Everyone had expectations. She was supposed to be perfect, graceful, elegant. She was supposed to marry someone powerful and produce heirs to continue the royal line. No one asked what she wanted. "What do you want?" Daniel asked her one evening. The princess was silent for a long time. They were sitting together in her private quarters, watching the stars through the great window that took up one entire wall. The light from a distant nebula painted her blue skin in shades of purple and gold. "I want to be free," she finally said. "I want to make my own choices. I want someone to see me as a person, not a princess." She turned to look at Daniel. "You do that. You see me." Daniel felt his chest grow tight. He was not supposed to have feelings like this. She was an alien princess, and he was a human soldier. The distance between them was vast, impossible to cross. But when she looked at him like that, the distance seemed to disappear. "I see you," he said quietly. "I always have." The princess smiled. It was the first real smile he had ever seen on her face. It changed everything about her. She was no longer cold or distant or untouchable. She was simply Valera, a young woman who was scared and lonely and looking for someone to trust. She reached out and took his hand, just as she had done on the ship after the attack. But this time, she did not let go. They sat together in silence, holding hands, watching the stars. No words were needed. Something had passed between them, something that went beyond language or culture or species. A bond had formed, a connection that neither of them fully understood. Commander Theron noticed the change. He saw how the princess looked at the human, how she smiled when he entered the room. He saw how Daniel's eyes followed her wherever she went. At first, he was troubled by it. Such attachments between species were rare and often frowned upon. But then he remembered the feast on Ashfall. He remembered how Daniel had fought to protect the princess while everyone else had failed. He remembered the look in the human's eyes when he had offered his hand to help her up from the floor. Perhaps there were worse things than a princess falling for her protector. Perhaps there were worse things than a human who was willing to die for someone he cared about. Theron said nothing. He watched and waited and made sure his guards gave the pair their privacy when they were together. On the last night before they reached the Valorian homeworld, the princess came to Daniel's quarters again. She had news, and it was not good. "My mother is ill," she said. Her face was pale with worry. A message came from the palace. She collapsed during a state dinner. The physicians do not know what is wrong. Daniel felt a cold fear grip his heart. When did this happen? 2 days ago. They are keeping it secret for now, to prevent panic. But if she dies... Valera could not finish the sentence. She did not need to. If the queen died, Malachar would make his move. He would seize power before anyone could stop him. And anyone who stood in his way would be destroyed. Daniel took the princess by the shoulders and looked into her eyes. "Listen to me. Whatever happens, I will protect you. I swore an oath to guard you, and I will keep that oath. Do you understand?" Valera nodded slowly. Tears were forming in her violet eyes, but she did not let them fall. She was still a princess, even in her fear. "I trust you, Daniel," she said. "I trust you with my life." Daniel pulled her close and held her. He could feel her heart beating against his chest, fast and frightened. He made a silent promise to himself. No matter what Malachar tried, no matter what dangers they faced, he would keep her safe, even if it cost him everything. The Valorian homeworld was in chaos when they arrived. Queen Seraphine had been poisoned. She was alive, but barely. The royal physician said she would survive, but she would be weak for many weeks. She could not rule. She could not even leave her bed. Lord Malachar moved fast. Within hours of their return, he had gathered the support of the military commanders and the noble houses. He claimed that the queen was too sick to lead. He claimed that the empire needed a strong hand to guide it through this crisis. And he claimed that he was the only one who could provide that strength. The princess tried to fight back. She demanded a meeting with the Council of Lords, the group of nobles who advised the queen. But Malachar had already turned most of them to his side. They refused to see her. They sent messages saying she was too young, too inexperienced, too emotional. And then Malachar made his boldest move yet. He accused Daniel of being a spy. The announcement came over every broadcast channel in the empire. Malachar stood before the cameras with a grave expression on his face. He spoke of the attack on Ashfall, claiming that Daniel had helped plan it. He said the human had been working with enemies of the empire from the very beginning. He called for Daniel's arrest and execution. The princess was furious. She screamed at the screen, calling Malachar a liar and a traitor. But there was nothing she could do. The lie was spreading across the empire like a fire. People who had never met Daniel believed every word. Commander Theron came to them with a warning. Malachar's soldiers were coming to take Daniel. They would be at the palace within the hour. "You must run," Theron told Daniel. "If they catch you, they will kill you. There will be no trial, no chance to defend yourself." Daniel shook his head. "I am not leaving the princess. Then you will die, and she will die with you." Theron grabbed Daniel by the arm. "I have seen what you can do. I know you are innocent. But you cannot fight an entire army, not even you." The princess stepped forward. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. "Then we will not fight. We will hide. And we will find proof of Malachar's crimes." Theron looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I know a place. The old section of the palace near the thermal vents. The walls there are thick enough to block telepathy. Malachar's people will not be able to sense you." They moved quickly. Theron led them through secret passages that had not been used in centuries. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled old and stale. But the walls were solid and the doors were strong. A small group of loyal guards joined them. These were soldiers who had seen Daniel fight on Ashfall, soldiers who knew the truth about what had happened. They brought weapons and supplies and set up a defensive position around the hidden chambers. For 3 days, they waited. Malaker's forces searched the palace, but they could not find the hidden rooms. The thick walls blocked all telepathic scans. The old passages were not on any map. During those 3 days, Commander Theron worked without rest. He contacted allies in the military who still supported the Queen. He gathered information from servants and guards who moved through the palace. And he collected evidence of Malaker's crimes. The evidence was damning. Financial records showed that Malaker had paid for the assassins on Ashfall. Communications intercepts proved he had ordered the poison that had sickened the Queen. Testimony from captured assassins revealed that he had been planning the coup for years. "We have enough," Theron told them on the 4th day. "If we can broadcast this to the Empire, Malaker is finished." "But how?" the princess asked. "He controls all the communication channels. He will block any transmission we try to send." Daniel had been silent, thinking. Now he spoke. "Not if I give him something else to focus on." Everyone turned to look at him. Daniel met the princess's eyes and saw the fear in them. She knew what he was about to say. "No," she whispered. "You cannot." "It is the only way," Daniel said gently. "While Malaker is busy with me, you can make the broadcast. His attention will be on the human spy, not on what you are doing. He will kill you, maybe." Daniel smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. "But I have survived worse." The princess grabbed his hands. Tears ran down her blue cheeks, leaving trails that glittered in the dim light. "I cannot lose you." "Not now. Not after everything." Daniel reached up and touched her face. His thumb brushed away a tear. "You will not lose me, I promise. But you must trust me. Can you do that?" Valera closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the tears were gone. In their place was the strength of a princess, the daughter of a queen. She nodded slowly. "I trust you," she said. "I always have." Daniel left the hidden chambers alone. He walked through the empty passages until he reached the main hall of the palace. Malaker's guards were everywhere, searching for him. He let them find him. They dragged him before Lord Malaker in the great throne room. Malaker sat on the queen's throne, a place he had no right to occupy. His silver eyes gleamed with victory as Daniel was forced to his knees. "The human spy," Malaker said. "I must admit, you gave us quite a chase. But it is over now. Your crimes will be punished." Daniel looked up at him. He was not afraid. He had accepted death many times before. "I am no spy. And you are no ruler. You are a murderer and a traitor." Malaker laughed. "Such brave words from a dead man. But who will believe you? Who will listen to a primitive human over a lord of the Valorian Empire?" "Everyone," Daniel said at that moment. Every screen in the Empire flickered. Malaker's face disappeared, replaced by the face of Princess Valera. She stood tall and proud, speaking directly to her people. She told them the truth. She showed them the evidence. Financial records appeared on the screen. Communications logs scrolled past. The testimony of the captured assassins played for all to hear. Malaker's face went pale. He screamed at his guards to stop the broadcast, but it was too late. The signal was being transmitted from a dozen different sources. There was no way to block them all. The throne room erupted in chaos. Some of the guards tried to follow Malaker's orders. Others stood frozen, unsure what to do. And some, the ones who had served the queen for years, turned against their new master. Daniel used the confusion to act. He broke free of the guards holding him and grabbed a weapon from the floor. He did not try to fight his way out. Instead, he fought his way forward, toward Malaker. The false lord tried to run, but Daniel was faster. He caught Malaker at the base of the throne and brought him down with a single blow to the back of the head. The traitor fell unconscious at Daniel's feet. When Commander Theron arrived with the loyal guards, He found Daniel standing over Moloker's body. The human was bleeding from a dozen small wounds, but he was still on his feet. He was still fighting. "It is over," Theron said quietly. "You won." Daniel shook his head. "We won. All of us." He turned and looked toward the door. The princess stood there, her eyes bright with tears and joy. She ran to him and threw her arms around him, not caring who saw, not caring what anyone thought. Daniel held her close and finally let himself breathe. The fourth world on their tour was called Ashfall. It was a mining colony built on a planet of black rock and red dust. The air smelled of metal and smoke. Daniel did not like this place. Something felt wrong from the moment they landed. The local governor welcomed them with a great feast. Hundreds of guests filled the main hall of the governor's mansion. There was music and laughter and tables covered with food that Daniel did not recognize. The princess sat at the head table with Lord Moloker on one side and Commander Theron on the other. Daniel stood against the wall behind the princess. He watched the crowd with careful eyes. The Valorian guards were relaxed. Their telepathy told them there was no danger here. Everyone in the room had peaceful thoughts, but Daniel noticed things that telepathy could not reveal. He noticed that several servants were moving in patterns that did not match the others. He noticed that some of the guests were not eating or drinking, just watching. He noticed that the exits were being blocked, one by people who looked like guards but wore no uniforms. He stepped forward and touched Commander Theron on the shoulder. The commander turned and looked at him with annoyance. "Something is wrong," Daniel said quietly. "The exits are being blocked. Some of the servants are not servants." Theron shook his head. "I sense nothing. You are imagining things, human." "Please, Commander." Just check the lights went out. For one terrible moment, everything was black. Then red emergency lights flickered on, and the screaming began. Daniel moved before he could think. He grabbed the princess and pulled her off her chair, throwing her to the ground behind the heavy table. A bolt of plasma fire cut through the air where she had been sitting just a second before. The assassins came from everywhere. They wore black masks and carried plasma rifles. They moved with speed and skill that spoke of years of training. And they carried small devices on their belts that hummed with a strange energy. Daniel recognized those devices. They were psionic dampeners, illegal technology that could block telepathic abilities. The Valorian guards were suddenly blind. They could not sense the attackers, could not coordinate their defense, could not even communicate with each other. Commander Theron stumbled backward, his hands pressed to his temples. The other Valorian guards were falling, confused and helpless without their mental powers. They had never learned to fight without them, but Daniel had never had telepathy. He had always been blind and deaf by Valorian standards. And that made him the most dangerous person in the room. He drew his pistol and fired 3 shots. 3 assassins fell. He pushed the princess further under the table and told her to stay down. Then he stood up and faced the enemy. There were at least 15 of them left. They turned their weapons toward him, surprised that anyone was still fighting. Daniel did not give them time to aim. He moved fast. Years of training took over his body. He rolled behind a stone pillar as plasma fire burned the air around him. He fired twice more, and 2 more assassins dropped. Then he was moving again, running low, using the tables and chairs as cover. An assassin came at him from the side. Daniel caught the man's arm, twisted it until the bone snapped, and took his rifle. Now he had 2 weapons. He kept moving. The princess watched from beneath the table. Her violet eyes were wide with fear and something else. Something like wonder. She had never seen anything like this. The human moved like water, like fire, like a force of nature. He was not stronger than the assassins. He was not faster. But he was relentless. Every time they thought they had him, he was somewhere else. Daniel felt a burning pain in his shoulder. A plasma bolt had grazed him, burning through his armor and into his flesh. He ignored it. Pain was just information. It told him he was still alive. He killed 4 more assassins with the rifle. Then the weapon ran out of power, and he threw it at the nearest enemy, hitting the man in the face. He drew his pistol again and kept fighting. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. When it was over, Daniel stood in the center of the room surrounded by bodies. Blood ran down his arm from the wound in his shoulder. His breathing was heavy, but his hands were steady. Commander Theron rose slowly from the ground. The psionic dampeners were failing, their power running out. The Valorian guards were beginning to recover, but they had not fired a single shot during the entire attack. The commander looked at Daniel. Then he looked at the dead assassins. Then he looked at Daniel again. "How?" Theron asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Daniel did not answer. He walked to the table where the princess was hiding and offered her his hand. She took it, and he helped her to her feet. Her hands were shaking. "Are you hurt, Your Highness?" Daniel asked. The princess shook her head. She could not speak. She was staring at Daniel as if seeing him for the first time. Lord Malachar appeared from behind an overturned table. His clothes were dirty, but he was unharmed. He had hidden during the entire fight. His silver eyes moved from Daniel to the princess, and something flickered across his face. Something that looked almost like fear. "We must leave this place at once," Malachar said. "More attackers could be coming." Daniel nodded. "I agree. Commander, can you secure a path to the ship?" Theron hesitated. For a moment, he seemed unsure whether to take orders from a human. Then he looked at the bodies on the floor and made his decision. "Yes," the commander said. "Follow me." They moved through the streets of Ashfall in a tight formation. Daniel stayed close to the princess, his weapon ready. The Valorian guards surrounded them. Their confidence slowly returning as the effects of the dampeners faded. When they reached the ship, Daniel finally let himself feel the pain in his shoulder. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. The wound was bad. He would need medical attention soon. A hand touched his arm. He opened his eyes and saw the princess standing before him. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. "You saved my life," she said. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. It was the first time she had spoken to him directly since he arrived. "I was just doing my job, Your Highness," Daniel replied. The princess shook her head. "No, it was more than that. The others hid. The others ran. But you fought. You bled for me." She paused. "Why?" Daniel thought about the question. He could have given her a simple answer. He could have talked about duty and orders and his mission. But he saw something in her eyes that made him want to tell the truth. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said. "Because you needed help and I could help you. That is all." The princess was silent for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised him. She reached out and took his hand, holding it gently in her slender fingers. "Thank you, Daniel Cole," she said. "I will not forget this." Daniel looked down at their joined hands. Her skin was cool and smooth against his rough palm. He did not know what to say, so he said nothing. But something had changed between them. He could feel it. The ship lifted off from Ashfall and carried them toward the stars. Behind them, the mining colony grew smaller and smaller until it was just a dot of light in the darkness. Daniel sat in the medical bay while a physician treated his wound. The princess stayed with him the entire time, refusing to leave his side. Commander Theron watched them from the doorway. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held a new emotion. Respect. The human had done what none of them could do. He had protected the princess when all their powers and training had failed. Perhaps the queen had known something they did not. Perhaps there was more to humans than any of them had believed. The days after Malachur's fall were filled with change. The traitor was locked in the deepest prison beneath the palace, awaiting trial for his crimes. The nobles who had supported him begged for mercy, claiming they had been deceived. Some were forgiven. Others joined Malachur in the darkness. Queen Seraphine recovered slowly. The poison had done great damage to her body, and even the best physicians could not undo all of it. She walked with difficulty now, and her once strong voice had become soft and tired. But her mind was as sharp as ever, and her will remained unbroken. When she was strong enough to sit on her throne again, she summoned Daniel to the great hall. The room was filled with nobles, diplomats, and military officers from across the empire. They had come to witness something important, though none of them knew exactly what. They whispered among themselves, glancing at the human who walked down the center of the hall with his head held high. Daniel stopped before the throne and knelt. He kept his eyes on the floor, as he had been taught was proper when addressing the queen. "Sergeant Daniel Cole," the queen said. Her voice was weak, but it carried through the silent hall. "Rise and face me." Daniel stood. He looked at the queen and saw a woman who had been through great pain. Her blue skin was paler than before, and lines of age had appeared around her silver eyes. But there was warmth in those eyes as she looked at him. There was gratitude. "You came to us as a stranger," the queen said. "A human from a young world, sent to guard my daughter. Many in this court doubted the wisdom of my choice. They said humans were primitive. They said you could not be trusted. They said you would fail." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. They were wrong. The queen rose from her throne. It was difficult for her, and Daniel could see the effort it cost her. He wanted to step forward and help, but he knew that would not be appropriate. So he waited. "You saved my daughter's life on Ashfall. You stood alone against enemies that should have overwhelmed you, and you did not fall. When my nephew tried to destroy our family, you sacrificed yourself to expose his crimes. You nearly died for us." The queen stepped down from the platform where her throne sat. She walked toward Daniel, each step slow and careful. The entire hall held its breath. "I have ruled this empire for 300 cycles," the queen continued. "I have seen many brave warriors, many loyal soldiers, many noble hearts. But I have never seen anyone like you, Daniel Cole. Your courage comes from something we do not fully understand. It comes from the heart of your species, a heart that refuses to give up, refuses to surrender, refuses to accept defeat." She stopped directly in front of him. This close, Daniel could see the tears forming in her eyes. "Humanity is young, but you are not primitive. You are remarkable, and I will not let you go." Daniel's heart skipped. "Your Majesty?" The queen raised her hand, and a servant came forward carrying a velvet cushion. On the cushion sat a metal unlike any Daniel had ever seen. It was made of a metal that seemed to shift colors in the light, and in its center was a symbol he did not recognize. "This is the mark of the shield of the crown," the queen explained. "It has not been granted to an outsider in over 1,000 cycles. Those who bear it are sworn to protect the royal family with their lives. They are given a place of honor in the palace, a seat at the royal table, and the respect of all who serve the throne." She picked up the medal and held it out to Daniel. "I am offering this to you, Daniel Cole. Stay with us. Be our shield, our protector, our family. You will not return to Earth. You will remain here, at my daughter's side, for as long as you live." Daniel stared at the medal. His mind raced with thoughts. Earth was his home. His mother was there, growing old without him. His friends, his memories, his entire life was there. Could he really leave it all behind? He looked past the queen and saw Princess Valera standing nearby. She was watching him with eyes full of hope and fear. She wanted him to stay. She needed him to stay. And in that moment, Daniel realized something important. Home was not a place. Home was where you belonged. Home was where people needed you, where people cared about you, where you could make a difference. Earth would always be part of him. But his future was here. Daniel took the medal from the Queen's hands. He pressed it against his chest, over his heart, in the way he had seen Valorian warriors do in ancient paintings. "I accept," he said. "I will be your shield." A sound rose from the gathered nobles. It started as a murmur and grew into something like a cheer. They were applauding him. These aliens who had once looked down on him, who had mocked his species and doubted his worth, were now celebrating him as one of their own. The Queen smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. She placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder and squeezed gently. "Welcome to the family, Daniel Cole." She returned to her throne, and the formal ceremony ended. But Daniel did not move. He stood in the center of the hall, holding the medal, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Valira came to him. She took his free hand and held it tightly. Her eyes were bright with tears she did not try to hide. "You stayed," she whispered. "You chose to stay." "I chose you," Daniel said simply. "I will always choose you." The princess laughed through her tears and threw her arms around him. She did not care that everyone was watching. She did not care what the nobles would say. All that mattered was this moment, this man who had changed everything. Commander Theron approached them as they separated. He extended his hand in the human gesture Daniel had taught him. "Shield of the Crown," Theron said. "It suits you." Daniel shook his hand. "Thank you, Commander." "For everything." "Thank me by keeping her safe," Theron replied. "I have a feeling you will have many more battles ahead." Daniel nodded. He knew Theron was right. Malachor was defeated, but there would be other threats, other enemies, other dangers. The galaxy was vast and full of darkness. But Daniel was no longer afraid. He had a purpose now. He had a home. He had people who trusted him, who believed in him, who loved him. That evening, Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the great city. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Valera stood beside him, her hand in his. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "I am thinking about how strange life is. A year ago, I was just a soldier on a small planet. Now I am standing on an alien world, watching a sunset with a princess." He shook his head. "I never expected any of this. Do you regret it?" "Not for a moment." Valera leaned her head against his shoulder. "My mother likes you. She told me so. She said she knew from the moment she saw you that you were special. Your mother is very wise. She is also very stubborn. She will never let you leave, you know." She meant what she said. "You are ours now." Daniel laughed softly. "I think I can live with that." They stood together in silence, watching the suns disappear below the horizon. The first stars began to appear, tiny points of light scattered across the darkening sky. Somewhere among those stars was Earth, the world Daniel had left behind. He would miss it. He would always miss it. But he had found something here that he had never found there. He had found where he truly belonged. The Queen had refused to let him go. And Daniel was glad, because he never wanted to leave. He was the shield of the crown. He was a member of the royal family. He was home, and he would protect this family with everything he had, until the very last breath left his body. That was his promise. That was his purpose. That was his life now, and it was more than he had ever dared to dream.